Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. Momentum builds for a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas as a final draft of the deal is provided by mediators. Washington prepares for the return of Donald Trump with 1 week to go until his inauguration ceremony. Ukraine's president offers to swap captured North Korean soldiers for Ukrainians held by Russia. And blast not, Jeff Bezos's anticipated Blue Origin rocket launch is postponed during the mission control countdown after a vehicle subsystem issue. To our top story, and a ceasefire agreement could be reached between Israel and Hamas after mediators in Qatar provided a final draft to end the war in Gaza. Current US President Joe Biden spoke to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on the phone over the weekend, stressing the importance of a ceasefire and a return of the hostages. Meanwhile, UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy is in Israel to discuss the matter with his Israeli counterpart. Al Arabiya spoke to Lammy ahead of his trip. Here's what he had to say.
We have been calling for a ceasefire since December of last year. We want to see that ceasefire. We want to see a hostage deal. We want to see the intolerable suffering of the people of Gaza come to an end and a surge in aid. And we are pressing, and I will be going on to Israel to speak to the leadership in Israel to see if we can bridge the gap. We must bring this devastating war to an end. I think there has been progress. I think we are close to a deal.
Let's go live to Tel Aviv now and speak to our correspondent, Sarah Coates. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. The UK and the US are pushing for a ceasefire deal, and Gideon Saar has said progress is being made in the ongoing negotiations. Give us the latest on the mediators' draft and when we could see an agreement actually be reached.
Hello there, Leigh Ann. There certainly is growing optimism here in the region that a deal could potentially be achieved over the coming hours, if not the coming days. Now, what we can report, according to Israeli officials, is that Hamas has now handed over a list of living hostages, something that it has said it previously could not do. Now, in addition to this, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has reportedly made a number of concessions, one of these being the names of these Palestinian prisoners that would be released from Israeli jails in exchange for these Israeli hostages, and also Israeli presence on the Philadelphia corridor, something that really was a major sticking point before. Now, also, just over the last hour or so, there has been confirmation that the Israeli officials have actually come out, told 3 hospitals here in Israel to prepare for the arrival of hostages, really sort of indicating, Leigh Ann, that a deal could be imminent.
There is some pushback in Israel to a deal. What more can you tell us on this, Sarah?
Certainly, this is very unsurprising. It's the same thing that we've been seeing time and time again throughout all of these negotiations. This is from the far right. This is Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister, and also the national security minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir. They have come out very strongly against this proposal, against any kind of deal, saying that it would be a catastrophe. But Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister, he does have a safety net here. Now, this is from the opposition leader, Yair Lapid. He's come out to say that if they pull out of the government, which they are threatening to do, if Netanyahu does make a deal, that he would step in and potentially save this coalition. So really, the big question here is, will there be a deal? When will it happen? And will the Israeli government survive, Leigh Ann?
I feel like we've been in this position before, but Netanyahu also met Donald Trump's incoming Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff. Is Netanyahu's willingness to now reach a deal with Hamas linked to the friendship he had with Trump in his first presidency and the fact that they want to carry that on?
I think there are a few very important points here. One of these being that the incoming President Donald Trump does not want to inherit this war that's been dragging on for more than 15 months with more than 46,000 people killed. We also do need to remember that he will be returning to the White House with a number of priorities for the Middle East. One of these being exerting this maximum pressure campaign on Iran. Another really trying to expand on the Abraham Accords and bring in key players, normalisation between key players like Saudi Arabia and Israel. And finally, to get this relationship between Israel and the United States back on track. So really, once again, this is a critical point for these negotiations. We do understand that Hamas has potentially handed over its answer to the Israelis, to these key mediators. This is being denied as we go to war by Israel, but certainly, once again, critical hours ahead. Leigh Ann.
Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv, thank you so much for joining us. US President Joe Biden is wrapping up his commitments from Washington, D.C. a week before the next president, Donald Trump, is due to be officially sworn in. There are suggestions he will take a call with Russian President Vladimir Putin as he prepares for a promised peace deal on Ukraine before he heads back to the White House. Caroline Malone reports.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear
that in a week there will be scenes similar in Washington, D.C. 8 years ago, Donald Trump was sworn in as U.S. president for the first time. He is returning to the White House with a similar outlook.
From this day forward, it's going to be only America first.
After campaigning to reduce government spending and increase efficiencies, tackle illegal immigration and boost border security, Donald Trump had pledged to expel up to 20 million immigrants without legal status. But the incoming border czar has told Republicans to temper their expectations due to the cost of doing that. Russia and any potential deal with Ukraine is front and center. Incoming National Security Advisor said he expects a call between Mr. Trump and President Vladimir Putin in the coming days.
Well, we would like to see a ceasefire in any minute, any day. I think that would be an incredibly positive first step on both sides. And that would then allow us to enter into the framework of some type of negotiated solution here. Everybody knows that this has to end somehow diplomatically. I just don't think it's realistic to say we're going to expel every Russian from every inch of Ukrainian soil.
The inauguration in Washington, D.C. is expected to be calmer than 4 years ago, when President Joe Biden was sworn in the aftermath of the January 6th Capitol riots by Trump supporters. He has been wrapping up his own policy, including adding sanctions on Russia's oil for its war on Ukraine.
These are the last days that Biden has before he hands over to President-elect Trump. And so his team is looking to take as many steps as they can to strengthen Ukraine's position and perhaps even to try and limit the scope for the Trump administration to roll back or to soften the US stance on Russia.
Joe Biden is due to speak at the State Department and make a final speech at the Oval Office on Wednesday.
Democracy is fragile.
Donald Trump's inauguration events begin on Saturday with a fireworks display and reception at his National Golf Club in Virginia. On Sunday, there'll be a wreath-laying ceremony in Arlington National Cemetery before a victory rally in D.C. Then he's due to be officially sworn back in on January 20th at midday. Caroline Malone, Al Arabiya News, Washington.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has made an offer to release 2 captured North Korean soldiers in exchange for Ukrainian soldiers being held in Russia. It comes as South Korea says that more than 3,000 North Korean troops have been killed or injured in Russia's war against Ukraine. Here's a reminder of just what Zelensky had to say.
The security service of Ukraine continues to work with prisoners from North Korea. One of them expressed a desire to stay in Ukraine. The other one wants to return to North Korea. If Kim Jong-un remembers these citizens at all and can arrange an exchange for our soldiers who are held in Russia, we can transfer such soldiers.
Has more on this story from Tokyo.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's office has said that Russia is trying to hide the fact that North Korean soldiers are fighting in the war. And President Zelensky is saying that he's willing to make an exchange offer to hand back 2 North Korean soldiers who were captured earlier this month and are injured in exchange for Ukrainian prisoners of war in Russia. Moscow hasn't denied that it is using North Korean troops in its war against Ukraine. And on Monday, a South Korean lawmaker briefed by the National Intelligence Service has revealed that it's believed that there are some 300 deaths and 2,700 injuries of North Korean soldiers fighting alongside Russia against Ukraine. And apparently North Korean authorities have told their soldiers that they should blow themselves up, commit suicide to evade capture, according to South Korea's spy agency. This comes as there are growing concerns among Western countries about Russia's strengthening relationship with North Korea, and it also follows South Korea last week saying that North Korea had carried out a missile test.
Rebecca Bundhan there in Tokyo. Thank you very much. Now, at least 24 people have died and more than 100,000 others are under evacuation orders as firefighters continue to tackle the Los Angeles wildfires. High winds are expected in the area this week, which could further fan the flames. California's Governor Gavin Newsom has called the wildfires the most devastating natural disaster in U.S. history. Let's go live to our US correspondent, Sally Patterson. Sally, thank you so much for being with me this evening. Sally, firstly, winds are picking up again this week. How are fire services and the authorities preparing for this?
Well, we're just finishing up a news conference which officials are using to give the latest updates on these fires, which are continuing to tear through parts of California. Now, the key message that we're hearing on Monday is we are not out of the woods yet. We are not in the clear. And officials are asking residents to continue to stay cautious and stay alert. In particular, they're saying do not go back to your residences, even if you think they're safe, because actually you might not be out of danger yet. Please wait and listen to instructions given to you by officials in the area. Now, what we're also hearing is that there is the firefighters, there is the water, and there is the resources needed to battle these fires. But what officials say is that they need a break from Mother Nature. That's what they're going to need over the next few days as high winds are expected to pick back up again. We're expecting some very strong winds on Tuesday night local time going into Wednesday morning, which could set back efforts to try and control these fires. But they're saying this is a time now both crucial for tackling existing fires and trying to prevent any new ones from starting.
It's been estimated that the damage estimates have now surpassed $250 billion. What has the government said on how they're going to start funding this and what the rebuilding program is actually going to look like?
Well, this is expected to be one of the costliest natural disasters ever in U.S. history. We're already in the hundreds of billions of dollars worth of damage. And we're hearing from the federal government that they will continue to push investment into the recovery efforts. They say they're going to fund, for example, 100% of the efforts to remove debris and help with this immediate emergency situation. But we do need to remember that in just a week's time, we're going to have a different president of the United States in the White House, and it will be up to him what the federal response is, at least, to the recovery efforts. Now, Donald Trump, who is the incoming president of the United States, hasn't always had the best relationship with the governor of California, Gavin Newsom. And over the weekend, we saw the two men exchanging words on social media and also in statements. Newsom invited Trump to come and see the damage for himself, meet some of those first responders. But he says that he hasn't heard back yet from Donald Trump himself. And the president-elect, in his way, has said he's been peddling some misinformation about what's going on with the fires, why there wasn't enough water to tackle the blazes, and really taking aim at Newsom there. So we'll have to see how that plays out as Donald Trump goes into the White House, and responsibility, at least in part, for the cleanup goes to him.
Sally, police have been issuing warnings about looters last week. We've been hearing that criminals have been dressed up as firefighters to gain access to people's home. The LAPD have also spoken about the increase in scammers, with some offering fake job offers, others asking for payments and donations over the phone. What advice is being given, and how can people stay safe from this?
Well, I think it's important to note that the overwhelming response to this disaster has been one of support and love pouring out from local residents and indeed people across the country, giving donations, money, food, other resources, even opening up their homes to those who've been displaced in these fires. But there are a few people who tried to take advantage of the situation. As you say, looters going into houses where the residents have evacuated and taking what they can. People have taken matters into their own hands, putting up signs outside their properties saying looters will be shot. They've also been hiring individual security guards to come and stand outside whilst they're not in the property. Police say at least 20 people have been arrested for looting. There's also been cases of people wearing fake responding uniforms, so fire uniforms and police uniforms as well, which has been condemned, of course, by authorities there. There are situations as well where people have been scamming those victims of the fires, pretending to be charities or non-profits who are helping people displaced in the fire. Now, what we're hearing from authorities in the region is for people to do their research before donating to any of these so-called charities. We know that GoFundMe, which is a fundraising website, has been verifying people on there themselves so that they know donors can give money with confidence. But they are stressing that people should take care when contributing and try not to give cash. Instead, they should use traceable forms of donations instead.
Sally Patterson, thank you so much for joining me. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making headlines today. Nawaf Salam, head of the International Court of Justice, has been chosen as Lebanon's new prime minister. The decision comes days after the country's parliament announced army commander Joseph On as president. Salam's appointment will come as a blow to Hezbollah, who wanted the incumbent Najib Mikati to remain in power. A tsunami warning has been issued in Japan after an earthquake of 6.9 magnitude rocked an area of Kyushu earlier today. Miyazaki Prefecture, where the quake was centered, as well as the nearby Kochi area, are in the danger zone. Authorities have urged locals not to enter the sea or approach the coast until the advisory is lifted. The UK's first drug consumption room has opened in Scotland today as the country's government attempts to reduce the number of drug-related deaths. The Glasgow facility will allow users to take drugs under medical supervision and with a clean and hygienic environment. There were over 1,000 drug misuse deaths in Scotland in 2023, a 12% rise on the previous year. And Meghan Markle's new Netflix show has been postponed because of the Los Angeles wildfires. The lifestyle series with Love Meghan was due to premiere this week, but will now air on the 4th of March. The Duchess of Sussex said it was important to focus on the needs of those impacted by the wildfires in her home state of California. Jeff Bezos's Blue Origin rocket launch was postponed earlier today after a vehicle subsystem issue. The 30-story tall launcher was due to take off from the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida, but was called off after a few anomalies during the mission countdown. Bezos believes his company could become a rival to Elon Musk's SpaceX. I'm now joined by the astronomer, Mark Thompson, to talk to me about this a little bit more. Mark, thank you so much for joining me. Well, listen, all that hype and excitement. I was sitting on my sofa. I couldn't wait. I'm sure much of the world were with me. And we didn't get a chance to see liftoff at all. What happened? What went wrong?
Well, do you know what? This happens so many times that we sit there with bated breath waiting for a multitude of different missions to launch into space, and then something goes wrong. It did happen to Elon Musk, and it's now happened to Jeff Bezos. We don't yet know the details of the failure that they experienced, but there are so many different subsystems on board, modern-day rockets, from propulsion to guidance. And so we just have to sit and wait for the report to come out, which will hopefully follow in a few days' time.
Yes, they're saying a few anomalies. Private companies are dominating the space race. That's something we've been talking about now for years. SpaceX is the most successful to date. Can Blue Origin actually rival Elon Musk at this stage, or is it just far too late in the game now?
No, not at all. There's still a little way to go for Bezos to be, a real rival to the Musk empire. He's got the landing of the booster systems down to a T. As of course Elon Musk has seen that with the Starship launches and subsequent landings, both on platforms based on the ocean, but also on land-based sort of landing systems, and that makes it massively cheaper to take satellites up into orbit and, of course, ultimately humans. So, but it's not too late at all for Bezos. He's not far off now, reaching the same state as Elon Musk. So fingers crossed he'll get there. It's always good to have a bit of competition after all.
I don't know if Elon Musk would like that, except he did say good luck. Yeah. Why is the New Glenn rocket the one to watch in the world of space? So much hype about this rocket.
I think it's because it's the second system now. So we've seen Elon Musk manage to land a booster previously in the days of the Apollo missions that took astronauts to the moon. The booster system, the biggest part of the rocket that got the astronauts away from the gravities of the Earth's gravity, they weren't reusable. They ended up quite often just floating down on a parachute and being lost in the ocean. But now, of course, we've got this wonderful design where the rocket booster can land again and be filled up with fuel again and reused, and it drives the cost down remarkably. So to have another company out there with another reusable launch system is really good to help drive the cost down, and ultimately that can help with making space more accessible for companies and also individuals who might want to experience that wonderful, what is probably at the moment less than once in a lifetime experience.
That moves me on to my next question. Why does Amazon founder Jeff Bezos and so many tech entrepreneurs want to explore space? And will we, as mere mortals, ever be able to visit the moon or live on Mars?
Yeah, well, I think unfortunately it's driven largely by financial gain. But a lot of things in the world of commerce are driven by financial gain. There's a massive market in being able to send satellites up into orbit. Of course, previously it was just down to perhaps the sort of research of the space environment, but we're seeing more and more companies wanting to launch research and development modules or satellites up into orbit, so that all manner of different exercises can be undertaken. So there's a real benefit in companies wanting a launch system, and of course, if you can be one of those players to offer a cheap launch capability, then there's financial gain in that. And of course, we've already seen that, for £250,000 you can get yourself up into experience weightlessness up in space. You're only kind of a 90-minute flight up and down. But space tourism is also going to be driven largely by advances in space technology, which commercial space organisations are doing a wonderful job at. And that's the second part of the question. One day, yes. Who knows when? Certainly space tourism is a massive aspect to commercial spaceflight, and we're going to see changes in the future. Whether it will hit our generations or not, I just don't know. I think we'll see in the next few decades, we'll see people in orbit, perhaps being able to holiday in orbit. I think it might be a little bit of a time before we get to visit the moon or Mars.
I always wanted to go to the Maldives on holiday, not quite into orbit. Astronomer,
you need to have some greater ambitions, I think.
Yes, I think so too. Astronomer Mark Thompson there. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's take a look at some of the top business news. Oil has extended gains for a third session, with Brent rising above $80 a barrel to its highest in more than 4 months. It's been driven by wider US sanctions on Russian oil and the effects on exports to top buyers, India and China. Chinese and Indian refineries have sought alternatives to Russian oil from the Middle East, Africa, and also the Americas. Apple is asking investors to vote against a proposal to end its diversity, equity and inclusion programs. It comes after a conservative group called on the tech giant to abolish the policies. The National Center for Public Policy Research says they are exposing firms to litigation, reputational and financial risks. Meta and Amazon have rolled back similar programs ahead of Donald Trump's return to the White House. And let's have a look at the sports news today. And Novak Djokovic has survived a little bit of a scare in his first round of the Australian Open to actually serve it out to take a victory. Wildcard Nishesh Basavaredi really made the win difficult for the 7th seed Djokovic. Meanwhile, British star Jacob Fernley beat injury-hit home favourite Nick Kyrgios. He was embarking on his long-awaited comeback in Melbourne. And Arina Sabalenka powered past Sloane Stephens to begin her quest for a third consecutive Australian Open. And British boxing legend Tyson Fury has announced he is retiring from the ring at the age of 36. The self-proclaimed Gypsy King is hanging up his gloves after a second defeat to Alexander Usyk last month. Announcing the news on Instagram, Fury said it had been a blast and he had loved every single minute of it. Now, the world's biggest religious gathering, the Kumbh Mela, is underway in India, with close to 400 million people likely to attend the 6-week-long festival. It's been called the Grand Kumbh Mela this year, as it takes place after 12 years. This rare Hindu event is considered more sacred by the devotees, as it's been held at the confluence of India's 2 holiest rivers, the Ganga and the Yamuna. Ishan Garg tells us about the scale of the event and the preparations from New Delhi.
70 to 80 million people, that's more than twice the population of Saudi Arabia, will attend the Maha Kumbh Mela just this week. The month-and-a-half-long event is being held in India's most populous state, Uttar Pradesh. As the festival kicked off on Monday, tens of thousands took a dip in the holy waters in the Prayagraj city. Devotees believe offering prayers at the confluence of the rivers Ganga and Yamuna during this auspicious period will bring them closer to salvation. It's a key tenet of the Hindu faith, which is why pilgrims from all across the world are making their way here, including some 1.5 million foreign tourists as well. The government has set up a whole new city to accommodate them. Spread over 4,000 hectares, this tent city will accommodate millions of pilgrims. Some 50,000 security personnel are being deployed here. and thousands of CCTV cameras enabled with artificial intelligence and facial recognition technology will scour the area for any disturbance in real time. With tens of millions arriving here on the busier days, stampede and overcrowding are a major concern. And officials say they are tracking social media websites in real time to counter the spread of misinformation that could potentially result in a catastrophe. The event is expected to have a mega impact on the country's economy. Analysts expect it to fetch the state government some $3 billion in revenue, and then there are political implications as well. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Bharatiya Janata Party, which came to power in the country and also in this state on plank of Hindu nationalism, could actually benefit from this gathering. The government says it wants the event to showcase India's Hindu culture and heritage on an international scale. And successful completion of the world's biggest religious event could solidify Mr. Modi's position as a favourite among his Hindu majority voter base. Ishan Garg for Al Arabia News, New Delhi.
A reminder of our top stories. Momentum builds for a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas as a final draft of the deal is provided by mediators. Washington prepares for the return of Donald Trump with 1 week to go until his inauguration ceremony. Ukraine's president offers to swap captured North Korean soldiers for Ukrainians held by Russia. And blast not, Jeff Bezos's Blue Origin rocket is postponed during the mission control countdown after a vehicle subsystem issue. Thank you, and that is all from us on W News. Thank you for joining us. Riz Khan is coming up next. And don't miss our special interviews with the UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy and Geir Patterson, the UN Special Envoy to Syria. Tom Burgess-Watson will also be here with a GNT. Good night, and thank you for joining me.